So with Sir Lucian Grange being named Media Person of the Year at this year's Cannes Lions, there's a distinctly musical feel to this year's festival. Obviously there are two sides to the music industry as well as the advertising and creative industries, the independent sector and the global network sector, and that is what we will be looking at today with my amazing panel here. Guys, if you could just introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Dan. I'm Ian Neal. I am director of Sony Music on the recording side, and I look after all aspects of sync within the film, advertising, TV, and computer games community.
Harriet Moss from Manners McDade. I'm the Global Creative Manager, also looking after sync for advertising, film, TV, video games, specialising in contemporary classical and electronic music.
And Sergio Pimentel, Senior Creative at Ninja Tune. I work across the catalogue, placing our artists and our writers on the Just Isn't Music side on film, TV, games and adverts.
Yeah, fantastic. Which brings me to my first question, really. In terms of placement and syncability across the creative industries, do you think that the distinction between the indie sector and the majors, if you like, is something that's still relevant, Ian?
I guess it depends which hat I'm wearing. If I'm wearing my Sony hat, there's that one answer, and if I'm wearing my music supervisor's film hat, there's another answer, because obviously I'm selling out as a, you know, Sony and buying in from an independent. Personally, I don't think the distinction is as great as it maybe once was. I think, you know, the majors, some of the things you said at the beginning, you know, risk averse, quite possibly. You know, we are reaching that point where, you know, global hits, large streaming is obviously the goal, and you know, they have to keep the lights on, shining brighter than some of the independents. So, you know, there's a bigger emphasis on actually, clearly market share is something that they spend a lot of time worrying about and concentrating on. But I don't know, you know, I'm not sure whether the risk averseness is necessarily there. Yeah, clearly we're not able to sign the same things that, you know, that maybe like Ninja would, because they have more time to develop these things. And I think that's where it's definitely different with the majors now. You don't find them, you know, we do need a rapid success rate. You know, first album has to do well. If it doesn't, you know, a chance of the second album is going to be quite slim. Obviously there are reasons to stay in business, certainly on a creative level, but, you know, of course everyone is looking at the financial side of it as well. And I think that's probably not always the case, you know, with the likes of Ninja, because they've just got a longer time to develop. It's not about a quick cash cow. So yeah, I mean, I think from an artist's point of view, there is a distinction. I don't know, you know.
Yeah, no, I think agreed. You know, I guess a label like Ninja that's got such a heritage and had such a history of signing exciting kind of experimental electronic music and kind of hip hop. You know, it's still kind of stayed true to its original kind of ethos. But then, you know, there are some exciting artists coming through from the majors as well. You know, it's, as I say, I think there's less so of a difference now, and less of the perception. I think that people still think that there's this huge divide, you know.
So is that, I mean, from your perspective, I mean, Ian just touched upon it then, it's essentially the margin for error. You have so there's more freedom in the sense that there are perhaps fewer commercial pressures, but from an artistic point of view, the lines are becoming blurred. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think we're maybe a little bit more different as well, because we're such a small independent, but also we're very specialist on one sort of genre of music. We're really working within contemporary classical to electronic, to sort of that beautiful melange in between. So we can take a lot of risks and sign very up and coming artists within that time frame, and I think we're always quite quick. We do sometimes have artists that, you know, a major might be wanting to sign later on, but we've signed them on quite early on in their career, and we love doing that, developing them, almost taking on a managerial role. So we can take a risk in that way, but we are still very much contained by our niche, which is nice to have sort of some parameters of being a specialist.
Yeah, and do you think that your artists, I mean, Nils Frahm springs to mind, from an artist perspective, do you think they prefer that more kind of family feel?
Yeah, I think it totally depends on the artist. Some artists, you know, it depends what an artist bases their success on as well. You know,
Yeah.
some artists, they just they don't feel they've made it until they have a certain kind of car commercial placement, for example, or they've won a Grammy, or it really depends. But then some artists just want to have close people around them, people they can trust, the same A&R people throughout their career. That's really important. So to certain artists, yeah, having a more naturally tight-knit feel is best.
Yeah. And one thing that occurred to me when I was thinking about doing this panel, is there a relationship between budget and creative freedom? I mean, Ian, you work on some amazing high budget productions.
Yeah.
Do you think that puts more pressure on you from a major perspective, or?
I'm trying to kind of. It's a difficult one. I mean, budget always comes into play, you know, from both sides of the parties. You know, you've got the client buying in at a number that they've got, and you've got the the label or the publisher selling at the other level, and then in between all that, you have got then I've always come from a creative standpoint.
Yeah.
But we are working in a financial business now. You know, sync is a major part of any record company and publisher now, and it generates a lot of money. So I'm always, personally trying to sort of find the balance between the two. Sometimes it's just a pure money option.
Yeah.
If you're working on something that's not going to bring a creative sort of upsell from that, then you just do the deal. But obviously, the ideal scenario is where you get those two things right, where the money's right. But obviously we are, the whole point of it is to try and get our music out there and get it exposed. So yeah, I always take into account, there'll be certain times of the year or certain points of an artist's career where we might do a different deal depending on where they are, in a given cycle. If I've got an artist coming out now with a new album, then obviously, if an opportunity comes now, that's more interesting than them coming to me asking for a back catalogue song.
Yeah.
If it's a back catalogue song, well, that's great, the money's there, but we're, obviously, the whole point of Sync has always just been trying to expose the music to a wider audience through all the other medias that you
so
don't
you think
get.
timing is crucial in that?
It very much, but then I don't think it's crucial for an advertising or a film company.
Yeah, no.
Then that's not really what most of the, unless of course there's purposely trying to place a song, a new recording into a feature film that's going to be a tie-in, or it's a John Lewis scenario where obviously they're looking for a big impact at Christmas. But yeah, timing is everything, and that's the bit that's always difficult to get right, because you've got people coming from different spheres with different ideas. But when it does work, it's obviously the effects are great. But yeah.
Of course, having a placement alongside any kind of album release would just be ideal for everybody, wouldn't it?
That's the icing on the cake.
Absolutely, and that's something we've explored quite recently by sort of trying to bring together PR campaigns with sync campaigns. But you can strategize that as much as you want, but it might not naturally take off. But it's good to at least be promoting the artists in both fields at the same time.
Yeah,
it's helpful.
So that's something that's kind of a forefront of your considerations when you're.
Yeah, I think it can play in both ways. You can have a completely unknown artist, and that's what the advertising executives, for example, might be looking for, something a bit unknown that they could break in some way. But quite often it's being able to have people to have a bigger public profile and through a PR campaign can be helpful for landing a placement. Yeah.
Another thing that I found interesting was, is there a difference? So I'm looking at, from my perspective, I'm looking at the dynamic between the indies and the majors in the UK. There's a distinct separation, perhaps because of especially in terms of TV and stuff, perhaps because of the blanket deals and how that affects the dynamic. In other territories, is the dynamic different? I mean, Sergio, do you find that, for example, in the US, people are more amenable to the indie sector than they are in the UK, or you do global stuff all the time?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on the project, really. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I still supervise independently, it's high-profile stuff. It's top 10, and more often than not, a lot of that stuff is with the majors. So, I think TV and film over in the US, they tend to sort of dip into some cool, cutting edge stuff that's coming out. It depends on the project, really. Most of the stuff that I work on is, obviously budget driven, of course,
Yeah.
but it's usually quite creative driven. I think, you know, it's just I guess in some advertising where sometimes the creativity, musically anyway, can kind of get thrown to the side because the budget is this much, and we'll just go for this, or you know. But generally, it's quite driven by it. So I don't see any distinct differences per territory necessarily.
Yeah.
I think within America, though, it's quite interesting with things like new media. If you think about something like Vice, they might want a bit more quick, one-stop, maybe an all-in budget type music, and then they might be a bit wary of working with majors. But something like the trailer industry, they'll clear anything at any price, and it's a much bigger thing, so they're going to be a lot more varied in that way.
Yeah.
Again, I guess it's budget driven though.
Yeah.
It's, you know, you're a one-stop shop where
Absolutely.
we can go to you and get everything through
Yeah.
because the budget is maybe not as much as they'd like to spend. So yeah,
For sure,
it kind of does come back to budget a little bit.
Does budget or the kind of provenance with indie or major make a difference in the quality of decision making? So I'm just interested in, like, when syncs go bad, you know, are the independents more likely to get it right? Or, I mean, have you got any examples you can think of where it's
That's a good.
I don't know. I don't know about if it's with the same with other companies, but I think also working within a small independent, your sort of overheads are a lot more obvious as well, and maybe you have a very close relationship with the artist, and you kind of can work out what might be best for them as well.
Yes.
You know, it might not be the biggest fee in the world, but it's going to really help them in some way. So obviously, you never want to take a too low fee or whatever. But I think we can maybe just have a really honest personal conversation with the artist.
So you're very aware of whether it's the right fit,
Yeah.
and if it's not the right fit, you
Yeah.
don't do it. So
Yeah.
in a sense,
I don't think we ever often come to a post-analysis situation where you're looking at something going, wow, we really undersold that, or you know, it's a dog's dinner and it's ruined an artist's career. I don't, you know, it doesn't really happen. It either goes under the radar and nothing is achieved, or you know, or is a success. I can't think of too many examples where we've really gone, that was a really bad idea. You know, we cut it short before then. I think, you know, instinctively you know what's gonna, you know, and you know, but I think the same with, you know, I don't think there's any distinction there between the majors and the, you know, and the indies.
No.
I think, you know, we're all still looking after our artists, and we're all still looking after their creativity, and we all want to do the right thing. And you know, and the conversations take place with those artists and those managers and the labels or whatever, and you'll collectively kind of come, you know, after, you know, many a time, if it's, you know, if it's a certain newspaper, or you know, a certain newspaper, let's just stick with a certain newspaper, you know, or you know, but once upon a time, you know, if you look at sort of like Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's and even, you know, IKEA, I mean, a lot of, you know, those brands, Argos, you know, artists wouldn't have touched any of them 10 years ago. They would have all been off radar. A, not for being cool, B, for being, you know, ethically incorrect or whatever. And now, you know, you look at the advertising, you know, I mean, I just did we just licensed the Roy Orbison track for Kentucky Fried Chicken, Crying, where they're literally crying over eating, you know. It's a really beautiful piece of work, you know, and if Roy was around and still eating chicken, I'm sure he'd be very happy. So I think that stigma's definitely changed. But yeah, you just have to just look at it on a case-by-case basis.
It's interesting that you kind of both saying that it's quite collaborative, that the artist has some input, because I think one of the things from the outside, the perception is, if you're an artist and you're with a small independent publisher or a small independent label, there's that family feel and they value your opinion, and if you're in a major, you just get told what to do, get back in your box, do this, but that's not the case.
It's really not the case, you know. The artists have consent and they will use it, you know. And even artists, I mean, it's difficult when you're working with an artist that is developing or trying to break, and a really great opportunity comes their way, and then they have, is this too early in my career? Am I going to be known as the guy that did that John Lewis? And there is a danger of that, but then I always think, well, if you've got more hits, you shouldn't worry about it. If you've got one song, then that's maybe where you're going to peak, and that's where it's going to end. But again, you know, we don't really do the, you know, the post analysis on that. It just organically happens.
That's interesting. I mean, it's nice to know that that's the case. That,
No,
you
and
know,
we've got artists, you know, I mean, I know, you know, Ninja in particular as a label have always been, you know, very successful on sync, and it's a major part of their business, you know. But we've got artists that are, you know, we would license at the same rate as Ninja, that are not selling any more records, probably less records on some of the Ninja artists, but we are actually making a successful career of them on the sync side. From my point of view, that's obviously nice. That means we can keep working with them, and hopefully we'll get to a point where they get an album or, you know, another EP, and you know, or we just keep the kind of ball rolling for a little while until it stops, and then, you know, fortunately they go away. But, you know, all we can do is what we're doing. You know, it's up to the great public whether they decide that these songs are going to, you know, be successful or not. So we,
so that's where the risk comes in. You just have to float it, and see what the feedback is.
I don't think that,
and that's the case across
and
the board.
I'm sure you do exactly the same.
Yeah, you know, with sync being such an important part now, you know, when we're signing people, it's you know, we've got a lot of writers on the Just Isn't Music side that we get working on a lot of stuff purely for sync as well, and been very successful with it. So. That's definitely key, and I guess the one thing I've seen over the last 16, 17 years, however long, is more the collaboration. I remember starting back at PlayStation, it was at 2003, and you know, I'd meet up with parent company, label, publisher, and you'd see people introducing each other in the meeting, and you're like, hang on a minute, you're both, and there's much more collaboration now. We speak a lot more with our sort of co labels and co-publishers, and just talk a lot more about the music that we own together, and see how can we make the most of it in the sync world, or this opportunity's come up. It's a lot more transparency, I guess, nowadays, a lot more.
Would you ever sign an artist that you distinctly thought that had no real sync opportunity? And I know that's obviously, you know, that's not always the case. Even the most unlikely things can sync. But, you know, you've got artists that clearly have a distinctive sound. You know they're going to work. Have you signed anyone that doesn't fit that brief, or is that just not?
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, with all the sub-labels that we have, you know, Technicolor and Counter, you know, I mean, there are certain labels where there's stuff that comes out that just isn't very syncy, you know, that we might get the odd thing for some banging techno
doesn't the artist
track.
think that because you're Ninja, you've got this great reputation and sync's a big part? Do they not have some a higher expectation?
Yeah, it'll depend, I guess, with the particular artist. I mean, you know, I guess with every artist, they'll sign up to a label because they want to make music, right? You know, there are still those out there that still want to do that for make music rather than right, I want to make music that's going to be used on that car advert or whatever in that film. So yeah, well, I mean, you know, that's the beauty of working somewhere like Ninja. They sign stuff they really believe in, whether it works across, you know, the sync income certainly allows us to be a little bit freer, I guess, with what we are signing. It's something that we love, and that's a beautiful piece of work.
And everything will find a home in that sense, I suppose. You know, there's a sync out there for everyone.
Perhaps.
There's just more syncs for some people than others.
Well, so a question for you two, really. I mean, are there any advantages that you think Ian enjoys at Sony that you would like to have in an ideal world? If you know,
I think it would just be.
Don't state the obvious.
No.
I think it would just be purely if an artist wanted a really big advance, and that was something that we can compete with in that space. But that's why we just have to offer such a huge range of other things. Like we can be more flexible on certain things. We can give people the deal they want. We can give them a very personal experience. You know, we just have to be able to put forward to an artist what the difference might be. But yeah, other than that, I don't know.
Yeah, no, nothing. I don't think anything that you particularly.
A huge big marketing tool that we can just push around the world. Like, I mean,
yeah, maybe more of the sort of label stuff coming in and the publishing stuff working together with marketing spend and things like that is probably quite different.
I mean, I've worked with Ian a lot over the years as a music buyer, and you know, I think things have got much better. You know, I think there were days where you try and line all the stars up and you know do this. I always remember working on games before, and you know, placing a track off an album that was coming out in the same week that our game was coming out, and having the discussion with the marketing director going, why don't you guys have a chat? Why would I want to? Oh, we're selling games, you know, we're not selling records. And then the records, oh, we're selling records, we're not selling games. And it's such an easy discussion to have. It doesn't take, it's not rocket science.
You think that kind of lack of joined up thinking is the thing of the past?
just you know, marketing manager, product, just look, have a discussion, because actually, you know, it's mildly criminal that some of this stuff's kind of falling by the wayside.
It's also easier to manage as well now and manipulate, you know, with social media and all those other things. You know, it was a different time when you had to physically get a record into the shop and you had 2 weeks to do it, and you know, and you needed to get it on the radio. Whereas now it doesn't. You know, the internet just doesn't. You don't require. You can literally go quite quickly. You know, I just had a sync in the US for a breaking artist this year. It was obviously a big breaking artist, and we've had a lot of syncs on him so far this year, but we just had one the other day that's gone on a film trailer, and it's a 2-minute trailer that's just got that one piece of music. And in the space of 24 hours I had a call or a text yesterday from the manager saying it's shot up 30 places in iTunes. Now, do we need to have a conversation with the marketing company of the film trailer? No, not really. We knew it when we knew when it was coming. We had all the dates lined up. The record label knew when it was, you know, when it was happening as well. What do you need to do? You just need to keep an eye on it, and then obviously then you can start pushing that. Whether there's another push towards radio now, whether there's another marketing spend because the album, you know, that's, you know, but you can do it in 24 hours, you know.
And indies can be really flexible in that way too. We work with Fabric and their Houndstooth label, and Snow Ghost, one of their artists, had a placement on the X-Men trailer last year, and you know, they just got this special EP release with the trailer version of the song, put it on Spotify, and it was literally in one day. We had very little warning of when it was coming out. But I think everyone's flexible in that way now. We all
So you think technology has enabled that fluidity?
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, you know, getting things up on iTunes used to sort of, you know, take 6 weeks now. You know, they know how quickly this market can react, and of course it's in the you know, their interest as well. You know, because you know, it's going to either go through iTunes or it's going to go through streaming, and so you know, they're all going to benefit as well. You know, and the audience demands that they, you know, if you leave it too long, if you miss a week now, you know, it's gone. It's gone. You know,
so we're getting back to timing being the crucial.
That impact week.
Interesting. So, I mean, so generally, I mean, I think kind of drawing things to a close here, but do you feel that the rest of the creative industries, TV, film, advertising, games, are getting the most out of the music industry?
Getting the most out of the music. I think they get what they want when they want, and we have to acknowledge that. You know, we're making music, and we're lucky that we have, you know, 3 or 4 medias that want to buy into that. And so, you know, we always have to remember that they are the client. Do they get the most out of it? I think they possibly do now. I don't think they fully always understand how we work. I think it's really important that the music industry, I've always wanted to, you know, from the very early stages, I needed to know how the advertising industry worked, and I needed to know how the film industry worked and the TV industry. Otherwise, we can't really partner up with them. You need to have that knowledge. And I think when you're working the jobs that we do, you do know that. You know, we could probably go off and go and work for an ad agency now and probably become a producer within, you know, within reason, or at least we would know the mechanics about where you would start and where you would get to. I don't know whether the advertising industry or the film industry really understand how the music industry works. In fact, I know they don't. They still think we're, you know, a bunch of lunatics running around, just throwing, you know. And I think that's, you know, so, you know, but yeah, I think they, you know,
getting there.
I'm sure people will give different opinions on a job by job basis. You know, some great experiences, and then others where they go, oh, they just screwed that up. So, well, why did we? You know, maybe we didn't have the information. But yeah, I mean, you know.
I agree. It probably feels a little bit one-sided. We have to know that, and we also have to just make it easy for them. We have to, you know, invite them to every show that we want them to come to, or make sure they have every release, make sure they have the music, explain how it would work. And so we have to feed all that information into them, which is great, and then if they want to use it at a certain time, then they will. But yeah, I agree, it's probably a little bit, the music industry is definitely driving that relationship, I would think. Yeah.
And you want those two things to, you know, I mean, I'm very conscious when a client spends a bunch of money and we sell a lot of records, that obviously that's great, but we also want to know that the brand itself had a successful campaign as well.
Yeah, of course,
So we will do post-analysis on certain things like that. You know, we have done it on House of Fraser couple of years ago. Obviously the success was kind of there to see, but we did actually look, and then we talked to the client as well to find out what impact that had for them. You know, because and their sales were up, you know, 10% that Christmas, partly because a great advertising campaign, but the music was absolutely integral to it. So it's important that we don't just forget, you know, oh look, yeah, we've done great, we've sold a bunch of records, made a bunch of money, and over there, you know, they've just lost the account because it didn't really work out. You do want to know that, you know, I like to know that it's, you know, that we've all come out winning.
Yeah, I think that was, from my perspective, that's one of the things I think, regardless of sector, that music does so well is it can help really define campaigns in a way that all of the other aspects of the campaign can't do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Well, to a degree, obviously. that might tell you something different.
Yes.
But but yeah, that's a good point.
Definitely, if it's done well, yeah.
Okay. So in conclusion, indies versus majors.
We're all friends.
We're all friends.
Good friends.